Yes, this is the intro assignment YouTube tutorial for CMTC 295 Web Programming 1. And in this tutorial, we're going to walk through the steps that you're going to need to take to set up the development environment on your laptops that we're going to be using throughout the course to build our web applications. And then we're going to use that development environment to create a very small web application. Now, coming into this tutorial, I'm going to assume that you have these three browsers installed and up and running on your laptops. And we're going to be using these three browsers throughout the course. The browsers are Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, and Internet Explorer. Mozilla Firefox is sort of going to act as our default browser, but we are going to be using all three browsers throughout the course. So I'm going to assume coming into this tutorial that you already have all three of them up and running on your laptops. If you don't, you should stop the tutorial right now and go out to these download websites that I've provided and install all three browsers. Again, we're going to be using all three. I'm making an assumption coming into this tutorial that you have all three installed. So like I said, if you don't, please stop the tutorial, go out to these download websites that I've provided and install Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, and Internet Explorer. Okay? Now, we're going to be using a very interesting software applications to actually create our web applications in this course. The software application we're going to be using is the NetBeans Integrated Development Environment, the NetBeans IDE. It's a very powerful IDE that you can use to build not only web applications, but Java applications, HTML5 applications, a number of different types of applications. We're going to be using it to create our PHP Web Applications, and I really think you'll like using this software application. Now, the tricky thing is, though, in order for NetBeans to run efficiently, we have to have first installed the Java Development Kit on our laptop. So that's actually the first software application we're going to install. We're going to go out to this Oracle website, and we're going to download and install the Java Development Kit. And then we're going to go out to the NetBeans website, and we are going to download and install the NetBeans IDE. The last bit of software that we're going to install, and this is a very critical part for our web applications, is our actual development platform. Okay? And the software that we're going to be using is called WAMP, or WAMP server. Okay? If you're running Windows on your laptop, which I am, and probably most of you are, we're going to be using WAMP. Okay? If you're a Mac user, then you're going to be using MAMP. Okay? And it's the Mac version of this development platform. In this YouTube tutorial, we're going to walk through the setup of WAMP, but the setup of MAMP is very similar to the setup of WAMP. Okay, so this is our development platform, okay, for our web applications. And WAMP, or WAMP server, whatever you want to call it, is a very interesting web development platform. It contains four different things, four very critical things that we need for our web applications to actually run. It contains a web server to control the serving and the processing of our PHP scripts. It has a PHP interpreter that allows us to process our PHP code. It has a MySQL database management system. We are going to be creating databases. Our web applications are going to be integrating, or interacting, I guess I should say, with a database, and the particular type of database is MySQL. So WAMP contains a MySQL database system, and we're going to be using that to store our databases that our web application is going to use. And the last thing that WAMP contains is a very interesting tool. It's called the PHPMyAdmin tool, and it's sort of a front end to the MySQL database. You can use it to create databases and tables and insert data into the tables and whatnot. So WAMP is a very interesting web development platform. It contains those four different things that I mentioned. WAMP actually stands for Windows, okay? Apache, that's the web server that we're going to be using. MySQL, the MySQL database management system we're going to be using, and PHP. MAMP, like I said, if you're a Mac user, you're going to be setting up MAMP, and that stands for Mac, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. Okay? So that's a little bit about the software that we're going to be downloading and installing. Next, let's just go out and let's get started setting up our software. And like I said before, the very first piece of software that we're going to download and install is the Java Development Kit. Okay, so we're going to go out to this Oracle website, and we are going to kick off the process by pushing this Java button. And that's going to take you to a page that says Java SE Development Kit 8 Downloads. Okay, you're going to scroll down a little bit on that page, and you're going to accept the license agreement. And then what you're going to do is you're going to download the install executable that's appropriate for your operating system. I'm running Windows 64-bit, so I'm going to download that install executable. And again, this is for the Java Development Kit, the JDK. Download is going to take a few minutes, and I want to mention too, in the course of this tutorial, at various spots, I'm going to ask you to take screenshots of what you're doing. So at those points, please take a screenshot and save the screenshot off somewhere into a PowerPoint presentation or a Word document, because I'm going to ask you as part of this assignment to submit those screenshots that I requested you take. So pay attention to the spots where I ask you to capture screenshots of what you're doing, and make sure you save them off, like I said, into a PowerPoint presentation or a Word document. Okay, so the JDK install executable has downloaded. I'm going to go out to my downloads directory, and there it is. It says JDK-8 update 11-windows.x64.exe. I'm going to double click the install executable, and I'm going to run it. And I'm basically going to next through a series of screens. I'm not going to make any changes to the default settings or the configurations that are offered up. I'm simply going to next through these series of screens. And I would strongly encourage you not to change any of the default settings or configurations as well when you're installing any of this software. The install is going to take a couple minutes, so be patient, hang in there. Okay, now once I push close on this last screen, I should have the Java Development Kit installed and running on my laptop. I can confirm that by opening up my control panel and going into the Programs and Features, and then I want to look for two things. Okay, I want to look for this application, Java 8 Update 11, 64-bit, and also this one, Java SE Development Kit 8 Update 11, 64-bit. So as long as I see those two programs, I know I'm good to go. I've installed the appropriate Java Development Kit. Okay, I go back out to my downloads directory. Now we're going to install the second bit of software that's going to be required for this course, and that's the NetBeans IDE, the NetBeans Integrated Development Environment. And again, this is the application that we're going to be using day in and day out to actually create our web applications. So you want to go out to the NetBeans website that you see here, And then to kick off the download process, you push the download button. Okay, and we're actually not going to use the latest and greatest version of NetBeans, which by the way is 8.0. We're going to use a previous version. We're going to use version 7.4. And the reason we're using a previous version is because I uncovered a minor bug in the latest and greatest version related to some of the features that we're going to be using to build out like the forms and the tables and whatnot in our web applications. And that bug is only in the 8.0 version. It doesn't exist in the 7.4 version. So we're going to use version 7.4 of the NetBeans IDE. And as you can see on this page, there are 5 different bundles of NetBeans that you can download and install. And each of the different bundles supports different technologies. I'm going to ask you to download and install the bundle that supports all of the different technologies, okay, including PHP. Okay, so push on the download button and download the install executable. Okay, the install executable is downloaded. I'm going to go back out to my downloads directory, and there it is, NetBeans-7.4-windows.exe. I'm going to double click on that install executable and start it up, and again, I'm simply going to next through a series of screens. I'm not going to make any changes to the default settings or the default configurations that are offered up, and again, I would strongly encourage you to do the same. Just simply next through the series of screens. And by the way, this install is going to take slightly longer than the installs of the Java Development Kit and also the install of WAMP server. So hang in there and be patient. It's going to take a couple of minutes. But again, just next through these series of screens, you are going to have to accept a few license agreements and do that, okay, but then just continue to next through the series of screens that are presented to you. Okay, so as you can see, the install of NetBeans does take a little bit longer than the install of the JDK, and installing WAMP won't take as long as NetBeans either, but we're almost there. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to uncheck this checkbox that reads contribute to the NetBeans project by providing anonymous usage data. I don't want to do that. Okay, so I'm going to uncheck that checkbox, and then I'm going to push on finish. And now we should have the NetBeans IDE installed on our laptops, and you can verify this by going out to your desktop, and you should see a NetBeans IDE 7.4 icon on your desktop. And in just a little bit we're going to launch the NetBeans IDE and we'll take a look at it. But before we get there, we have one last bit of software that we have to install, and that's WAMP server. Okay, so let's go out to the download site for WAMP server. This is it. Okay, and we're going to scroll down a little bit on the page. Okay, and again, you have to download the appropriate version of WAMP server based upon your operating system. I'm running Windows 64 bits, so I'm going to download that version of WAMP server. To kick off the process, you push the WAMP server 64 bits and PHP 5.5 2.5 button, and then it's going to bring up this little pop-up, and you can push the download directly hyperlink, and it's going to take you to the SourceForge website. If you wait a few seconds, the download will start, and there you can see that the download has started. And this is the download of the install executable. Okay, so the WAMP server install executable has downloaded. I'm going to go out to my downloads directory, and there it is, WAMP server 2.5-Apache -2.4.9-MySQL -5.6.17 and then -PHP 5.5.12-64-bit.exe. There's the install executable for WAMP server. I'm going to double click on that and start up the install executable, and again I'm simply going to next through a series of screens. There is one selection, okay, that we have to make. We have to select our default browser, and we're going to use, as I mentioned before, Mozilla Firefox is our default browser. But I am going to next through these series of screens. I'm going to accept the license agreement. Okay. Now, you are probably not going to receive this dialog that I received because you haven't had WAMP server previously installed on your laptops, but because I did have WAMP server previously installed, the install executable is telling me that I already have a folder out there for WAMP that exists. Would I like to reuse it? And I'm going to say yes. You are probably not going to receive that dialog because you haven't had WAMP server previously installed on your laptops. In this screen, I am going to select these two checkboxes: create a quick launch icon and create a desktop icon. I want both of these icons. So I'm going to check them both, and then I'm going to push next. And then I'm going to install. Okay, now here is the point where I'm going to choose my default browser, and as I mentioned before, I'm going to use Mozilla Firefox, and that's what I would like you to use as well. So you want to navigate out onto your computer where the executable for Mozilla Firefox is located. Select that. Next through the remainder of the screens in the install executable, and then finish the process. Okay, now at this point we should have WAMP server installed on our laptops, and you should be able to tell this in a couple of different ways. First of all, you should have a quick launch icon. Okay, so in the lower right hand corner of your desktop, you should see something that looks like that. Okay, there's a little WAMP server button, a quick launch icon, and if you put your mouse over it, it should say WAMP server, and it might say server offline, but that's okay. Don't be alarmed by that. As long as you see this icon and it's green, then you know you've installed WAMP server and it's up and running on your laptops. Second way, okay, you can tell that you have it installed is you should see a desktop icon, okay, which I'm pointing to right now for WAMP server. Okay, and you can use either of these icons to start up WAMP server. Right now it should be up and running, okay, on your laptops, but you can use either of these icons to start up WAMP server. Okay, start up WAMP server. On the desktop, or excuse me, the quick launch icon, actually if you push it, there's a pop-up that appears, and from within that pop-up there are different options for starting up WAMP server, stopping WAMP server, restarting WAMP server. Okay, so if I wanted to, I could stop WAMP server right now, and you can see the desk quick launch icon change to red, okay, which means that it's not running. Okay, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to start it back up again so that it's green, okay, and I have WAMP server running right now, okay. So what we're going to do, first of all, is we're going to test out WAMP server a little bit just to make sure that all of its components are running. MySQL is running and we're able to access MySQL. We want to make sure that the PHP interpreter is working properly, so we're going to test that out. And then we're going to make a couple of configuration changes to WAMP server. Configuration changes that are going to be required a little bit later on in the course for some of the work that we're going to be doing, uploading files and whatnot. Okay, but first of all, we want to do a little testing of WAMP server. Okay, first thing we want to test is we want to make sure that we can get to that PHPMyAdmin tool that I had mentioned. Okay, remember that's the front end for the MySQL database that allows us to create a database and create tables in a database. Okay, so we're going to test that out. Go to the quick launch icon, okay, for WAMP server. Go to that quick launch icon and push it, and from within the pop-up that appears, okay, what you're going to do is you're going to select this PHPMyAdmin option, and that's going to launch the PHPMyAdmin tool, and it actually runs within it's going to run within the Mozilla Firefox browser, because we chose Mozilla Firefox as our default browser. So this PHPMyAdmin tool is going to run within Mozilla Firefox. So go ahead and select that PHPMyAdmin, and then Mozilla Firefox should pop up, okay? And you should see a screen that looks something like this, and over in the left hand corner you can see it says PHPMyAdmin. Okay, this is the PHPMyAdmin tool, and what we're going to do is we're going to create a database, and then we're going to drop that database just to make sure that the PHPMyAdmin tool is working appropriately. Okay, so to create a database, you push on this new hyperlink. It's going to take you to a screen that looks something like this. And what you're going to do in the center of the screen, underneath of Create Database, is you're going to give the database a name. Name it after yourself, your first name. I'm going to name my database Sue. Okay, so I'm going to name this database Sue, and then I'm going to push the Create button. Okay, so push the Create button. And at that point, you should see a message that says Database Sue has been created. And then down in this little table, you should see that there is a database that's named after you. In my case, it's named Sue. Okay, so what I would like you to do right now is take a screenshot of this screen with your database, okay, created. Okay, so I'll give you a few seconds to get that screenshot. Take that screenshot and then save it off somewhere in a PowerPoint or a Word document. So now what we're going to do, we don't want to keep that database, okay? We want to drop it. We want to delete it. So we're going to put a check mark beside it, okay? And we're going to go down to this drop button, okay? And we're going to push the drop button, okay? And you're going to get a little message, are you sure you want to drop this database? And you're going to say, okay. And the database has been dropped. You can see it doesn't exist there anymore in the table of databases. Okay, so we've tested out the PHPMyAdmin tool just to make sure that it's functioning appropriately. Everything looks good. Okay, now the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to test out our PHP interpreter. We're actually going to run some PHP files, some PHP applications, I guess, if you want to call them that, in the browser, and that's where we're going to run them. We're going to run them in the Mozilla Firefox browser. But before we do that, I want to show you where the files are located that we're going to be running, and we'll take a quick peek at those. So if you go out to where all your folders and where all your files are, where you want to navigate to, okay, is your C drive, and you should have a folder in there called WAMP, okay, that got installed. And then within the WAMP folder, there are a bunch of other folders, including an alias folder, a bin folder, but a very important folder is this www. Okay, it's within this folder okay, where you're going to want to save all of your PHP files and your PHP web applications, because that's where they have to be located in order for the PHP interpreter to process them correctly and run them in the browser. Okay, and what we're going to do right now is we're going to test out this index.php file. We're going to run it in the Mozilla Firefox browser, and we're also going to test out this test MySQL.php file. Okay, and we're going to start off by testing this index.php file. Okay, so go back out to Mozilla Firefox, okay, and you can go into the tab where you were running the PHPMyAdmin tool. And all you want to do, all you want to type into the location box of the browser is localhost, okay, because everything that's running right now is running on your local machine. Apache is running on your local host, MySQL is running on your local host. So that's where you're going to run all of your web applications from in the browser. You're going to start off by typing localhost. Okay, and what's going to happen when I hit the enter key is that index.php file application is going to get run. Let me try that again. Not localhost assignment 5, but just localhost. Okay, and what you should see is something like this. Okay, the contents of that index.php file, when rendered by the PHP browser, should generate something that looks like this. You should see exactly this, okay, in your browser right now. Okay, so what we're doing right now is we're running that index.php. Okay, and you should see something like this. It's giving you some information about WAMP server, the version of Apache that we're running, the version of PHP that we're running, and various other bits and pieces of information. Okay, so that looks good. That tells us that the PHP interpreter is working, and you know that we're able to run it within our browser. Okay, now I told you there were 2 PHP files that we want to test out. The second one that we want to test, I'm going back into WAMP www. The second one is this test MySQL.php. Okay, we want to make some updates to it though before we test it out. Okay, so you can open this file in Notepad. Okay, and it's going to look something like this. This is going to be the contents of the file. But I'm going to have you make the following changes to it. Just a second, bear with me. The contents of this file should look like the file on the right. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy, okay, the contents of the file on the right, and I'm going to paste them into the file on the left. Okay, just like that. Okay, so this is what your test MySQL.php file should look like. Okay, and I'm going to give you a few minutes to stare at that, because you're going to want to type that into your test MySQL.php exactly as you see it right now. Okay, and then once you get that typed in, save it. Simply save it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go out to Mozilla Firefox and we're going to run this file. Okay, but in order to run it, we're actually going to have to type in the name of the file. Okay, so we're going to have to type in the name of the file. I'm going to actually copy it just to make it easier for myself. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to go out into Mozilla Firefox, and after localhost this time I'm going to put a /, and I'm going to paste in the name of that file, test MySQL.php, and then I'm going to push the enter key. And all you should see is the following: connection OK. And what this file is actually testing, and as a matter of fact, I'd like you to get a screenshot of both of these things if you don't mind. Not that file, actually. I want to get this file. I'd like you to get a screenshot of this, the contents of your test MySQL.php, and also Mozilla Firefox saying connection OK. What we're doing within this PHP file is we're actually connecting to MySQL, okay, using our username and password. And MySQL is telling us, okay, the connection is okay. We were able to connect from a PHP file to our MySQL database. Okay, so I'd like you to get a screenshot of that. Okay, so far, so good. Okay, everything is looking good so far. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to make a couple of configuration changes to a very important file within WAMP server. It's called the PHP.ini file. It's a configuration file that's used by WAMP server. And what we're going to change is the maximum size for file uploads. Okay, a little bit later on in the course, we're going to be building out some functionality in our web applications. It's going to allow us to upload files. Okay, so we need to make this change in order for that functionality to work appropriately. So we actually have to update, again, it's a configuration file. It's called the PHP.ini file, and it's located in two places. So we're going to have to update this file in two different places. First of all, you want to go back out to your WAMP directory. Then you want to go into the bin directory. Then first of all into Apache, and then Apache 2.4.9. Okay. Then into the bin directory, and then you can see there's the PHP.ini file. Okay. You're going to want to open that up. Okay, and you can open it up with Notepad. And you want to search for, okay, the word post and then underscore. Okay, you want to search for that word, post underscore. Okay, and you should come to an entry in the file that says post max size. Right now it's at 3 meg, which is pretty small. What that means is the largest file that we would be able to upload is 3 meg in size. We're going to change that. We're going to change that to 64 meg. We're going to make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so change the 3 meg to 64 meg and then simply save that change. Okay. Now, this file exists in two places in WAMP server. Okay, here in this Apache folder, but also in a PHP folder. So after you've saved that change, and by the way, I would like to ask you to take a screenshot of this, okay, and save that screenshot off. Okay, you've changed the post max size to 64 meg in the PHP.ini. Make a screenshot of this. Make sure you've saved that change, okay, and then you can exit or close the file. Okay. Now we're going to make that same change, okay, in the PHP.ini file that's located in a different directory. So you're going to go back out to WAMP, back out to your root directory, WAMP, go into the bin directory again, but this time instead of going into the Apache directory, you're going to go into the PHP directory, and then PHP 5.5.12. Okay, and in this directory, if you scroll down a little bit, you should see the same file, php.ini. Okay, you can open that up in Notepad, okay, and then search again for post underscore, and you should come to that same entry for post max size, and you can see that it's set at 3 meg, and we want to change this entry to 64 meg as well. Okay, this is the php.ini file in the PHP folder. Save that change, take a screenshot, okay, take a screenshot of this too, save off your screenshot, okay, and then you can close the php.ini file. Okay. Now, in order for those changes that we just made to take effect, okay, what you have to do is you have to go down to that quick launch icon again. Okay, there it is, the quick launch icon. And what we're going to do is we're going to restart all of our WAMP services. We're going to restart them all. Okay, in order for WAMP to pick up those changes that we made to the post max size, we have to stop and restart WAMP server. Okay, so please restart WAMP server. Okay. Now, one last thing that we're going to check is our username and password, and this is for MySQL. Okay. Everybody has a default username and password for MySQL. Okay. The username happens to be root, and the password is an empty string. Okay. And I would recommend that you keep your username and password that way. Okay, don't make any changes to it. But if for whatever reason you need to make changes, or you would like to know where you can find out what your username and password is, you can go to the following file. Go back to WAMP, then go into a folder called Apps, and then go into the PHPMyAdmin 4.1.14. Okay, and in this folder there is a file called config.inc.php. You can open that up. Okay, and it's probably best, instead of using just Notepad, let's open it up with Notepad++. If you have Notepad++, if you don't have Notepad++, some other text editor. Okay, but open that file up, and you can see there are two entries in that file if you scroll down a little bit. Okay, one for user and one for password. That's telling you the username that you're going to use for MySQL root, and the password, an empty string. If for whatever reason you wanted to change your username and password for MySQL, and again, I wouldn't recommend you do this, but if you want to, you can change them in this file. Okay, you don't have to do that right now at this point, but that's how you would change them. Okay. So, at this point, we've set up all of the software. Okay, the Java Development Kit, NetBeans, and WAMP server. We've made some configuration changes to WAMP server that are going to be needed for later on in the course. We've tested out our PHP interpreter for WAMP server. It looks good, and we've also tested out our ability to connect to MySQL and also run the PHPMyAdmin tool. So, we should feel pretty good at this point about WAMP server. The last thing that we're going to do is we are going to start up the NetBeans IDE. You haven't taken a look at it yet. We're going to start up the NetBeans IDE, and we're going to create a very small PHP web application using NetBeans. We're going to run that web application in our development platform, WAMP server. Don't be surprised if it takes NetBeans a little while to launch. Okay, you can see it's taking a little while, it's loading. Okay. It's still not quite done yet. Okay, so we're going to give it a few moments. It's opening up all of my projects. I have a number of projects that I've created. You won't have as many projects as I have created. Obviously, you haven't used NetBeans. Okay. Okay, but there. Oh, nope. It's still loading. You can see down in the lower right-hand corner of the IDE, it's still setting up. So I'm going to give it a few minutes to set up before we dig into taking a look at the NetBeans IDE and talking about it. Okay, there it's done loading and setting up. So this is the NetBeans IDE. Okay, up in the left-hand corner, you should see NetBeans IDE 7.4. And the way your IDE, when you started up the first time, it looks, definitely isn't going to look the way that I have the way that mine looks right now. First of all, because you haven't created any PHP projects yet, okay? And you probably you don't see all of the same windows that I have open in my IDE right now. But don't worry, we're going to walk through the steps that you need to take to get your IDE looking and set up like mine, because all of the different windows that you see right now that are open, those are the windows that you're going to need in order to build out your PHP web applications. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the different windows that we see. Starting off in the left hand corner, you can see there's a projects window. Okay, and in this projects window you probably don't see anything yet because you haven't used NetBeans, but I have, and I've created a bunch of PHP applications. You can see them listed there, and that's what the purpose of this window is. It's to give you the ability to look at all of your PHP applications and all of their files and all of their folders. Okay, this PHP-class 19, that's a PHP application I created. It's got 2 folders that we can open up, and in the source files folder there are all the PHP files in that particular web application. Okay, so this projects window is an area where you can view within the IDE all of your PHP applications, their folders, and their files. Okay, if you double click on one of these files, it opens them up in this code editor. Now you probably don't see the code editor now. In your IDE, probably what you see is a big large gray screen, or you might see a startup screen that has some information in it about NetBeans, and that's fine if you see a large gray area, or if you see a startup screen in just a little bit. That's going to change. You will see the code editor, and it's in the code editor where we'll be typing our PHP code. Okay. Also, there's a files window, which is very much like the projects window. It displays all of your PHP applications, okay, but in a slightly different format. Okay, just a slightly different format. Okay, I prefer to use the projects window to view my PHP applications and their files, but you could also use this files window, okay, to view your PHP applications and their files. Okay. Now, by the way, all of these windows are resizable. You can make them larger, you can make them smaller. Okay, so just wanted to mention that. And also, if you don't see any of these windows, for example, if you don't see the files window, you can open up any of these windows by going up to the top of the IDE, the menu bar. There's a drop-down option for window, and if you select that, there are various options for any of these windows that we're talking about. Okay, so if I wanted to reopen the files window, I can select files, and there it is again. Okay, so projects and files. We are going to be using this navigator window a little bit, so you should have that window open, and what that allows you to do is to quickly navigate through your files by clicking on different HTML elements. Okay, it's kind of interesting. If you double click on an element in the navigator, it takes you immediately to that element in the code editor. So we will be using the navigator. Okay, and again, if you don't see the navigator, if it's not open, you can go up to the window drop down and select navigator. Okay, and there it is. There's the navigator. We talked about the code editor. You probably don't see the code editor right now, and as a matter of fact, this is an example that you're looking at right now of a PHP file. Okay, very similar to the one that we're going to be creating in just a few moments. Okay, and also on the right hand side of the IDE, there's a window called Palette, which you probably don't see yet either, and in just a few moments we're going to open up that window, okay, when we start creating our first PHP web application. Okay, but this is the way ultimately you're going to want to have your IDE configured. These are the windows, the major windows that we're going to be using. Okay, the projects window, the files window. Okay, and you can toggle back and forth between those two. The navigator window, the code editor, and this palette. Okay, so let's begin creating a PHP application. Okay, to kick off the process, you want to go up to the top of the IDE to the menu bar, and you want to select File, and then from within the drop down that appears, there's an option for New Project. You want to select that new project. Okay, and in the new project window, you want to select PHP under Categories, and then PHP Application underneath of Projects. Once you have those two selections made, you push on the Next button, and in the Name and Location window, you want to do two things. Okay, you want to give your PHP application a name. So we're going to name this PHP Project Intro Assignment with no spaces. Okay, and then down below, we want to specify the location of where we want this application to go. We want it to go out into our WAMP www directory, because remember, that's where all of our PHP applications have to go in order for us to run them successfully in the browser. That's where the PHP interpreter is looking for our applications. That's where the Apache web browser is looking for our PHP applications. So we have to make sure that all of our PHP applications go out there. So you want to check this checkbox, put NetBeans, I'm jumping ahead of myself. We don't want to do that in the Name and Location window. I apologize, we're not going to do that here. We are going to name our application, but then we're going to push Next, and then here is where we're going to place our application in the WAMP www directory. Okay, in this Run Configuration window, you're going to check the checkbox that says Copy Files from Sources folder to another location, and the other location is going to be the WAMP www directory. Now you're probably going to see this warning, okay, at the bottom of the window, and that's fine. You can just disregard that. But you want to push the Browse button, okay, and then you want to go out to your WAMP www, okay, and you're going to push Open. And that's where we're going to copy our files out to. Okay, and then you're going to push the Next button, and then you're just going to finish. Now, behind the scenes, what NetBeans is going to do is it's going to generate a PHP project, a PHP application for us, and there you can see it. You should see it now in the Projects window, PHP Project Intro Assignment. It's generated a Sources Files folder for you. It's even generated an index.php file for you, and you should be able to see the contents of that index.php in the code editor now. Okay, you should see something very similar, exactly like what I'm looking at right now. You can see NetBeans has generated some code for you, okay, in this PHP file, and it's a mixture of code. There's some HTML, and there is a PHP element where we're going to insert our PHP code in just a few moments. Okay, but NetBeans has generated an index.php for us, and also some code that we can see now. Also at this point, you should be able to see on the right hand side, okay, of the IDE this palette now. It should say HTML and HTML forms. If you don't see the palette, okay, if you don't see it, that's okay, don't panic. Go up to the window, drop down option, select IDE Tools, and then select Palette, and you should see it. Okay? Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of code, okay, into this PHP file. But before we do that, as a matter of fact, I'd like to ask you to take a screenshot of the IDE right now as you see it, because at this point you should have all of the appropriate windows open that you're going to be using throughout the course for your web application development. So please take a screenshot of the NetBeans IDE right now and save that off. Okay? So now what we're going to do is we're going to insert some code into this PHP file. We're going to start off by giving our PHP file a title. So place your cursor, okay, in between the start and the end tags of the title element, and type in some content. We're going to type in intro assignment. Now you want to make sure you're saving as you go. To save a PHP file is pretty easy. Go up to the menu bar again, and there are a series of buttons across the top underneath of the drop down options, and there's one button that has 2 floppy disks on it. If you put your cursor over it, it says save. Okay, you want to make sure you're saving as you're working. Okay, that's going to save the changes that you just made. Okay. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is you're going to place your cursor after the start tag for the body element, and you're going to hit the enter key so that your cursor is flashing within the body element, right above the PHP element. Okay, this is the PHP element, so you want your cursor flashing right above that. Okay, and then what we're going to do is something kind of interesting. We're going to drag over some elements actually from the palette. Okay, underneath of HTML forms, there's a button for form. Okay, we're going to add a form into the body of this page. So, and we're going to pretty much let NetBeans do it for us. Okay, which is cool. By pushing these buttons and dragging and dropping, NetBeans will actually generate HTML for us. And what we want NetBeans to do is generate HTML for a form. So push this form button, and then drag your cursor over to the spot underneath of the body start tag, and then let the button go after you drag the form over, and you should see an insert form window like this. Okay, and in this window we're going to make a couple of entries. Okay, in the action field we're going to type in index.php. The method that we're going to specify is post. We're going to give our form a name. We're simply going to call it intro. Now, after you've made those entries, I'd like you to take a screenshot of this and save it off. So action is index.php, method is post, name is intro. And then push on OK. And then behind the scenes, you can see that NetBeans generated some code for us, some HTML code. That's the HTML code for a form. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put some more code inside of that form. We're going to put 2 text fields and a submit button. Okay, so place your cursor so that it's flashing at the end of the form start tag and hit enter. And then type in some content. Type in the words first name. Okay, and then go back over to the palette, and there's a button for text input. Push that button and then drag over into your index.php to where your cursor's flashing right after the first name, and then let the button go. And in this insert text input window, we're going to input some information. We're going to give this text field a name first. We're going to make sure that text is selected under type, and we're going to give it a width, 25 pixels. I'd like to ask you to get a screenshot of this. Save the screenshot off, and then push OK. You can see that NetBeans generated some more HTML code for us. Okay, your cursor should be flashing at the end of that input element. Hit the enter key again and type in some more content. Type in last name, and then do the same thing. Drag another text input, okay, over into your page, right to where your cursor is flashing after the last name. Do the same thing, but this time slightly different information. We're going to name this field last. We're going to make sure it's a text input, and we're going to give it a width of 25 as well. Okay, hit the enter key again, and then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to drag over a button, a submit button. So push the under HTML forms, the button and drag over into your file to where the cursor is flashing, and let go. And in the insert button window for the label, we're going to type in submit. We're going to make sure that submit is the type, and then we're going to give this button a name, submit. I'd like to ask you to make a screenshot of this window. Okay, and then push OK, and there you can see we have a submit button now that we've added. Save your changes. Okay. So far now we've updated our index.php, but we haven't added any actual PHP code. We're going to add that next. Okay. All we've added is HTML code. And really, for the most part, NetBeans has generated all that code for us, which I think is pretty cool. But anyway, now it's time to add some PHP code. So you want to place your cursor down a little bit further in the file after this comment. And this is a comment, by the way. Anything you see in gray is a comment. Okay. Place your cursor at the end of that comment and hit the enter key just once. And now you can begin entering your PHP code. All of your PHP code, and we're going to talk about this in detail throughout the course, but all of your PHP code, in order for it to be interpreted appropriately, must go in a PHP element, in between the start tag and the end tag of a PHP element. Okay? So you have to make sure that your cursor is flashing inside of that element, which it is right now for us. And we're going to type in a little bit of code, PHP code. You can see something interesting about NetBeans too. It's sort of helping us out. As I'm typing in this PHP code, it's offering me, this is called IntelliSense, it's offering me suggestions for how I should finish the code. Okay? And what I can do actually is I can double click on the code that I want NetBeans to use in this particular line. Like right now, I want NetBeans to generate, okay, this $_post. Okay, so I'm going to double click on it in just a moment. You can see when I single click on it in the IntelliSense, it gives me a description up above of what this post variable is used for. Okay, and it's a variable, but I'm going to double click on it. You can see NetBeans inserted it there for me in the code. It's helping me finish off my code. That's called IntelliSense. Okay, and you want to take advantage of IntelliSense as much as you can. Let NetBeans help you out with the code. Okay, so this is the code, the PHP code I'd like to ask you to add. Okay, I'm going to make sure you save after you get the code added. Just a couple of lines of code, 2 or 3 lines of code. Okay, but now what we're going to do is we're going to run this PHP application. It's a very small application. There's only one file. Okay, the web applications that you'll be creating throughout the course are going to be much larger than this. They're going to contain multiple files, and there's going to be a lot more PHP code. Okay, but for testing purposes now, this is definitely going to give us a feel for if things are working or not. Okay, but what we want to do in order to test this out is we want to run this PHP code in the browser. Okay, but we have to specify it by its name. So what we're going to do first of all, before we go out to the browser, we're going to go out to Mozilla Firefox. We're going to go back out to our WAMP www directory, and here is that project that we just created. Okay, remember we're saving it out in our WAMP www directory. Okay, so what you can do, what I always do to make it easier is I copy the name of that project. Okay, and then I'm going to go into my browser and I'm going to place that entry right after localhost. So it's going to be localhost / and then the name of that project. Now by default, it should automatically run the index.php when I push enter. Okay, and it has. There's our form. You can see that we created with our first name and our last name text fields and the submit button. So our file is being run, our index.php is being run. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to input a first name and a last name. I'm going to push on submit, and there you can see I got a welcome message. Welcome Sue Chaklovsky. Okay, so that's tested out the PHP, the small PHP application that we created. Okay, now what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to get a screenshot of this application after you've run it. Okay, save a screenshot of that. Then what I'd like to ask you to do is to copy the URL, okay, that you see in the location box of the browser. Copy that, then go into IE and paste it into the location box of IE, because you should be able to run this same application in all of the browsers. So I'd like you to run it, input your first name and your last name, and push on submit, and you should generate the same output, the welcome message. Okay, and then get a screenshot of this running in IE, your intro assignment PHP web application. Get a screenshot of it running in IE. Then copy the URL from the location box of IE. Then go over into Google Chrome and paste it into the location box in Google Chrome and run it again. Input a first name and a last name and push on submit. And I'd like you to get a screenshot of that too. Okay, so a screenshot of it successfully running in Firefox, a screenshot of it successfully running in IE, and another screenshot of it successfully running in Google Chrome. Okay, then we'll go back out into NetBeans, and again, this is the file that we were just running. Okay, I should have asked you to do this before, but once you have all the code inserted into this index.php file, I'd like you to get a screenshot of that too and save that off. Okay. Now, a couple of other things real quickly here at the end. We're almost done, I promise. A couple of things I wanted to illustrate. Interesting features within NetBeans, things that you can do. If you're the type of person, and I often do this, I like to see my code in hard copy. If you like to print out your code, a very interesting thing that you can do within NetBeans, okay, when you have a file selected, you can go up to the file drop-down option, and there is an option within that drop-down that says print to HTML. If you select that option, and then within the print to HTML window, you check the open generated HTML in browser and push OK, okay, you can view the contents of that file in the browser, and then you can print it out from the browser. Nice and neat. I do that a lot, and I think that's a very interesting feature because it retains the color scheme that's used within the IDE, and it prints out neatly with line numbers. I do that a lot. So if you're the type of person that likes a hard copy of your code to look at, an awesome thing you can do within NetBeans. Now another thing, and I am going to ask you to do this as part of this assignment, another thing that you can do with your projects is you can export them to a zip file. Okay? When you submit your assignments, I'm going to ask you to submit your applications. And I'm going to ask you, by the way, as part of this assignment, not only are you going to submit all of these screenshots, but you're going to submit this PHP intro assignment application. But first you're going to zip it. You're going to export it to a zip file. So with the project selected, you're going to go up to the File drop-down, and you're going to select Export, and then you're going to select to zip. Okay? And in the Export Project to Zip, in the Build Zip, okay, text field, you specify where the zip file is going to be saved. And I usually save the zip files out in my documents. You might want to, save the zip file somewhere onto your C drive, wherever you save off your work for your classes. But I usually save these zip files in my documents, and then you're going to give it a name. So I always just call it the name of the project. So PHP project -intro -assignment .zip. Okay, and then push save, and then push export, and there in my documents folder I have a zip file that contains the contents of this project, and this is what you're going to want to submit. Okay, so you can double click into that zip file and you can see there's the index.php file, okay, along with any of the other files that might be a part of the project. We only have one PHP file, okay, but like I said, eventually you're going to be submitting web applications, PHP applications that contain a lot of PHP files. Okay. But that's all the functionality and the features within NetBeans that I wanted to discuss in this intro assignment. As we're coding throughout the course, we're going to talk about a lot of other things that you can do within NetBeans. But that's it so far as this intro assignment goes. I hope you found it beneficial. And don't forget, you're going to be submitting your screenshots as well as a zip file of this PHP project that we created. Thanks a lot.